Well, good evening. Welcome to our midweek Bible study. We're going to be looking in God's Word in Luke chapter 14. So I want to invite you to get a copy of God's Word and turn to Luke chapter 14. We're going to be looking at verses 7 through 11 tonight. We're going to focus on verse 8 and 9. And I'm going to be talking about a parable that is right before the one I shared last Wednesday night. I talked about when God throws a party. And Monday, when I come into the office, I started looking at Luke's account of this parable when God throws a party that I was sharing about the great supper that's going to be given one day. And I noticed there was another parable that Jesus was talking about being invited to a house of one of the Pharisees. And thought it was very interesting that we noticed there is an ambitious guest who wanted to have a seat of recognition. And Jesus shares a parable about that. And so, as I was thinking about the parable in Luke 14, verses 7 through 11, I want to talk with you tonight about when proud people fall. When proud people fall. We'll look at the text in a moment, but you understand as well as I do that every time a prominent figure takes a tumble, we are astonished. We're amazed. We just can't believe it. We can never quite accept the fact that a high and mighty person may fall. We have seen presidents fall, congressmen, representatives, senators, judges, preachers, Christians, and so on. They have fallen from time to time. Well, Jesus offers us a parable here that is dealing with the high and mighty and also the low and the weak. Now, I want you to understand this. That which makes a person a prime candidate for a hard fall is not the position, it's called pride. Only as Christ can, knowing what is in people's hearts, he can put his finger on the problem that is involved when proud people fall. So I want to share with you 3 reasons that you'll understand why proud people fall. So let's look at Luke 14, starting in verse 7. He told a parable to those who were invited when he noted how they chose the best places, saying to them, when you are invited by anyone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in the best place, lest one more honorable than you be invited by him. And he who invited you and him come and say to you, give place to this man. And then you begin with shame to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit down in the lowest place, so that when he who invited you comes, he may say to you, friend, go up higher. Then you will have glory in the presence of those who sit at the table with you. For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. Then he also said to him who invited him, when you give a dinner or a supper, do not ask your friends, your brothers, your relatives, nor rich neighbors, lest they also invite you back, and you be repaid. But when you give a feast, invite the poor, the maimed, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you shall be repaid at the resurrection of the just. When proud people fall. When does this take place? Well, look at verse 1. When they sit in judgment on others. Proud people fall when they sit in judgment on others. We notice verse 1 of Luke 14. Now it happened as Jesus went into the house of one of the rulers of the Pharisees to eat bread on the Sabbath, that they watched him closely. In any given community, there is a crowd of mutually insecure individuals who feel threatened by anyone who dares to be different openly as they express their will. These insecure individuals, they like to band themselves together and have a little clique, and in rather a childish, a snobbish way, they like to look down their noses at others who do not conform to their concepts, who resist their efforts to push their standards on society in general. Now, Christ giving this parable, he is saying to the crowd that you are in for a rude awakening. Judgment cliques, these judgmental people, they existed in the times of Jesus. but they also exist in our day as well. And you will notice that there are some of the snobs, as we notice in this text, that they invited Jesus to one of their social affairs. Now, this is something that does not just take place in society, it also takes place in the church. You will find in churches there are many cliques that they want their way, and they will look down at those who may not dress like them. They may not act like them. They may not live like them. Well, in verse 1 of Luke 14, we understand that Jesus was invited to this dinner party because the company of Christ was not sincerely desired. They really didn't want to fellowship with him. We notice in the last part of verse 1 that Jesus was invited so that all the people may watch him with a critical eye. They may watch him with a cynical eye. You notice the last part of verse 1 says, they watched him. For all practical purposes, Jesus was there on exhibition. Neither the host nor his guest accepted Christ as one of themselves. They thought they were higher than him. Now, it is not at all pleasant to be invited to a dinner party and to be put on display. To have your every action, your every word weighed. But it's interesting as we think about this, those prejudiced, proud people forgot that the one they invited to dinner was the omniscient Lord, and he had a major advantage over them. They could not read his mind, but he could read their minds. He dominated the occasion. It did not dominate him. Now, Jesus did not lower his ideas. He did not abandon his principles to fit in with the rest of the crowd. Invited as a guest, he proved to be the most unconventional in that he became the most outspoken critic of the bad manners of the host and the guest alike. So when do proud people fall? When they sit in judgment on others. But secondly, when do proud people fall? Look at verse 7 of Luke 14. When others see through their pretense. When others see through their pretense. So Jesus goes to this house of one of the rulers of the Pharisees. They are watching him closely. And in verse 7, so Jesus told a parable to those who were invited when he noted how they chose the best places. Jesus saw through their pretense clearly. They were playing games. They were pretending to be people of great honor, to be people of importance, deserving the highest place at the feast. Jesus just turns to them and says, listen, if you really think you are an important person, you don't have to tell others. They will discover it in time. Jesus watched how they chose the best seats at the feast. There must have been some unbelievable or some rude scramble for prominence, for a seat of recognition. It appears this man had been accustomed for guests to seat themselves. And there was a mad rush for the seats at the head table. In this parable, Jesus goes on to expose the false principle which they acted upon. And the lesson Jesus is teaching is this. Self-honor is no honor. Self-honor is no honor. The only honor that is worthy of the name is given by another. So let's look at self-honor, okay? First of all, self-honor is an overcompensation. It's an overcompensation. Now, a basic psychological drive is the desire to achieve status. It's the desire to belong. The desire to have a secure sense of belonging. This frustration of this desire is seen in our childhood development with the wrongful pursuit as we grow into adulthood. People feel that their worth, they feel that their value is based on what others think of them. Therefore, they'll scrounge, they'll push aside, they'll shave, they'll cut corners, which is overcompensating for the frustration they experienced growing up in the family as a child, or maybe being part of the gang, or maybe in child elementary school or grade school, or just elsewhere. They are looking for value and worth in the eyes of others. Self-honor is an overcompensation. But look at verse 11. We learn that self-honor is in direct contradiction to the teaching of Jesus. It's in direct contradiction to the teaching of Jesus. Verse 11, Jesus said, "For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted." So the teachings of Jesus place havoc on many of our accepted concepts. You know, the Beatitudes are they're open denials of accepted values. The Bible says it is blessed to be poor in spirit. Preacher, are you kidding me? No. Not when a person has to cut his or her way in this world. You know, someone said that the Beatitudes would not furnish any actual character material for a thrilling biography. The answer is actually obvious. The Beatitudes once became flesh. His name is Jesus, and his biography is the most thrilling ever known to mankind. See, self-honor is in direct contradiction of the teaching of Jesus. But we notice something else in verse 11. Self-honor misunderstands humility. Self-honor, look at me, it misunderstands humility. Now, humility is not being a coward. No person is weak who dares to look on the splendor of God and then look on his or her littleness. Neither is humility a lack of self-appreciation. It's not a lack of enthusiasm. Jesus knew no proud person would ever believe that humility is the way to be exalted. Therefore, no proud person would ever take that way. Jesus knows that humility does not gain honor among the high-minded person. On the contrary, the world generally takes people at their own estimate. It gives ambition first place and modesty last place. We see that in America. Christ reminds us that there is a society in which humility is held in honor and pride is set last. When do proud people fall? Look at verse 8 and 9. When people push too hard. When they push too hard. In verse 8, Jesus said, "When you are invited by anyone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in the best place, lest one more honorable than you be invited by him. And he who invited you and him come to you and say, 'Give place to this man,' and then you begin with shame to take the lowest place." Christ tells of the ambitious guest who pushed too hard. We notice that he was ultimately humiliated before everyone. Well, why? Why was he humiliated? Why had he taken such a hard fall? Because he pushed himself beyond the limits of the gracious host was prepared to go. The formula that Jesus offers is a very simple one. Don't get pushy. Don't get pushy. Don't push. Jesus understands human nature. He knows that there are seats of honor and that they have to be filled. But he says, don't push. Don't make a mad rush for the best seats. Why is that? The general public will tolerate for only a short period of time a public official or maybe a special interest group that is throwing its weight around. The average citizen has rights too. And when these rights are disregarded by a few, you can be sure that a day of accounting will come when proud people fall. You know, as we close our study tonight, not once have I ever preached on this text. And as we look at this proud, ambitious, yes, what a fall he took. The Bible teaches that pride comes before a fall. I believe it'd be wise for us not to look like those or act like those at the wedding dinner of Christ, speaking of. I mean, understand, we can be sure that Jesus still marks how we choose the chief seats in life. And when we find ourselves scrambling for the choice seats, making a mad dash, rushing in to get the best seat, they're numbered among the proud. And when we find ourselves among the proud, Jesus is speaking to our heart. And if we will listen to Jesus, he says, for whoever exalts himself will be humbled. Whoever humbles himself will be exalted. When proud people fall. I hope that you've enjoyed this message tonight. Hope that it will encourage you to look unto Jesus. Not to take the choice seat at the table, but allow the gracious host to seat you, that you may not be humiliated, fall on your face before others. I pray you are safe, your family's safe and healthy. I pray God be with you until we meet again. God bless you in Jesus' name.